Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest in our series of webinars from Hitachi ZeroCarbon. I'm Mike Nugent. I'm the head of Hitachi ZeroCarbon Europe, and I'm joined by Colm Gallagher, who's our chief data scientist. And we're going to be taking you through our solution today and our viewpoint around battery. Just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded, so you can come back to this at a later date. We're also going to be taking questions at the end of the session. So we have our colleague Nathan, who'll be compiling questions. So if you have any questions as we go through, please just drop them into the chat, and we can then cover them off at the end of the session. So welcome, thank you for joining us. I'm going to kick off. So if we go to the first slide, we're going to kick off with a bit of a quiz. Thursday morning, let's get the juices flowing. And if you can put your answer into the chat, we just got 3 quick questions just to get you thinking about battery. So question 1, after its end of vehicle life, how much capacity can a battery typically retain? So I'll give you a minute or so just to get your answers into the chat. Don't feel obliged to submit if you're not too sure. We will be providing the answer very shortly. Some good answers coming through here. Cool. So I think from what I could see, most people got that right. So if we go to the next one. Yep, 65%. Okay, question 2. What percentage of EV batteries are currently recycled after use? Maybe a slightly trickier one. The answer is 5%. 5%. So there we go. Slightly less than I'd thought, but not as low as I thought either. Which of the following can prematurely degrade batteries? Frequent rapid charging, consistently charging to 100%, or warmer climates? Just give you 30 seconds or so to get your answers in on that one as well. So yeah, Daniel nailed that one. It is, in fact, all three. All three can have a significant impact on your batteries. So thank you for taking part in that. Really appreciate it. We're getting caveated responses as well. Excellent. I'll let those questions and the answers come through. Thank you for that. Appreciated. So let's have a look at batteries at the moment and where they're going. Just even if in the UK. So EHGVs, relatively low number, EVans quite a high number, so LCVs and e-buses beginning to grow. But what's really dramatic is that in sort of 9-10 years time, we're going to see a significant uplift in the number of batteries that are operational within the UK, and that actually puts a lot of stress and strain both in terms of the supply chain, but also how you manage batteries and what that means for warranty. Because if we've got a lot of batteries that are falling out of warranties, there's a lot of OEMs that are on the hook for warranty replacement of cells and for batteries. And that creates an interesting dynamic that I'm not sure many people have really thought about in the market so far, that actually the proof that the battery has been cared for under warranty conditions is going to become an increasingly important aspect of how batteries are managed. And in some markets like buses, if we look at the B network, where you've got the asset owner is different from the asset operator, that's going to result in some fairly difficult conversations between the different parties and then back to the OEM who is responsible for replacing a battery under warranty conditions. So there's some interesting dynamics that are already beginning to grow within this market. So if we look at the next slide, there are quite a large raft of challenges that are and opportunities that are around battery, and why battery optimization and why we think battery optimization is so important. Ultimately, what we're looking at here is really residual value of that battery. So what is that battery worth at the end of its first life? Could it be used for further first life applications in mobility solutions, or could it actually be used in fixed battery installations? And how do we manage and maximize the lifespan of that battery during that life, which can actually have a big impact on the TCO of the battery ownership and that large element of a cost of a vehicle that is now the battery. There's new challenges around risk in terms of operations from a fleet perspective, in terms of range, and delivering buses on a daily basis or other vehicles on a daily basis to deliver the range that they should be able to deliver. And then we get to the warranty question and that greater burden around warranty, and making sure that the warranty conditions are met, and that if there are any faults with the battery, that they can be managed appropriately. Then we come to some of the opportunities, and there's hidden value in these batteries in second life and in the residual value. And there's an opportunity also to be better at buying warranties or extending warranties going forward. And creeping up on the rails is new regulations and regulatory requirements. Sorry, I think we've just got a bit of an echo. So if everybody else would mind going on mute, I'd be grateful just to avoid that. Thank you for the intervention there. So coming back to the missing, so the non-compliance issue, new regulations around battery passport and battery usage, and the role of the operator with regards to battery management is going to become increasingly important, and it's going to become something that the regulators are going to become increasingly aware of and keen to ensure that those precious metals and those minerals that are in the batteries are being utilized effectively in life, as well as outside of life in terms of second and recycling of those batteries. So optimizing that battery is going to become increasingly important. And what do we mean by battery optimization? So if we go to the next slide, just bring that out and bring that to life a little bit more. So first and foremost, we've got a number of questions in terms of what that means. So how do you minimize your capital and your operational costs of the battery and out of warranty replacements? How can you optimize the utilization of that battery in its life? And also from a safety perspective, are you managing those batteries carefully? Now, we don't prescribe to the idea that electric buses or electric vehicles with a battery in them are any more dangerous than a diesel-based or an ICE-based vehicle. But clearly, when there is a fire, the issue of putting out that fire is a bigger risk. And when we're dealing with depot-based fleets in particular, you want to make sure you're looking after those batteries and you're charging and managing the battery in its life as effectively as possible. So there is both risk but also opportunity. And what we're all about is how you can unlock that value and minimize the risk of your battery-operated fleet. So let's have a look at what we mean by that. So to many of you, I guess you're probably quite familiar with the classic degradation curve of a battery, and what we see is that the OEM warranty is often well within tolerances for the life of that battery, and rightly so. You know, the OEMs are going to be very keen to make sure that they can deliver their warranty commitments of a minimum state of health at the end of the warranty period. So they have quite a lot of contingency in there. But what's interesting is that what we're seeing in the bus industry, but also in other fleets, that the contract term for delivery of those fleets is often longer. So how do you make sure you're caring for that battery during that period and you're not degrading those batteries quicker, which actually creates significant risk in terms of battery replacement, either in or outside of warranty, because that's a disruption to your business, even if it's within warranty. So this is the typical picture. But what we're concerned about is, if we look at the next slide, is what happens if that battery is not cared for during its life effectively, and actually it degrades a lot quicker. And you know, we look at the whole battery cohort as they come into operation. We think about a normal distribution, and you're going to have, even within standard chemistries, you're going to have the bulk of the batteries are going to last well within the term, and certainly within the OEM warranty term. But there are going to be outliers. There are going to be some, for some dint of the chemistry, and not going to last as long, and some that are going to last a lot longer. And part of our job is to help understand what those conditions are, but also what those chemistries might be. And Colm's going to talk about that in more detail as we go forward. So heavy usage and poor management of your batteries is a risk because, one, you might not be able to replace those batteries under warranty, but two, if you do have a contract term and you don't want to avoid battery replacement costs, the risk of having to replace them becomes greater if those batteries are not cared for. So what we in Hitachi ZeroCarbon are all about is the next slide, which is about how we can move that curve to the right and extend the life of those batteries through the appropriate management of those batteries. And as I said, Colm is going to talk to you more about how and what we can do in terms of monitoring and managing those batteries so that we can think about how you can maximize the opportunity. And when I sum up later, we'll talk about the actual economic value of this. But ultimately, there are a number of different factors that are going to come into play here. So there's the replacement cost of the battery, the avoidance of that cost, so depreciation costs. You've also got accruals benefits, but you've also got maintenance costs benefits if you can extend these batteries for longer and manage them more carefully within the operational life. So those are the real key focuses for us, and we see a significant financial benefit through the appropriate management of those batteries. Next slide, please. So we're going to take you through these pictures here on the right hand side, but really what we're all about as a business is how we can maximize that residual value of the battery. And what we mean by that is whether you want to dispose of that battery at the end of its first life or utilize it in other applications, whether that be in other fixed or mobile applications. We want to extend that battery life to help avoid replacement costs or to defer those replacement costs for as long as possible. We want to make sure those batteries are safer and that you are suffering from less downtime, but also you've got a full data set on that asset life. So you have auditability. So if it does come down to the fact that you need to replace those batteries because there has been a failure, you can prove that you're not the reason for it and that you've managed that battery effectively, and you can provide that evidence to the OEM. So as we come back to the point I made right at the beginning, there could well be a flood of OEM warranty claims going forward. You want to make sure that your warranty claim is not dismissed and that you can get your batteries replaced and you can continue your operations for as long as possible by utilizing those batteries. So that's kind of our positioning. And as you can see, there's a number of slides there that Colm is now going to take you through in a lot more detail in terms of our product suite from the perspective of zero carbon battery. Over to you, Colm.
Great stuff. Thank you, Mike. So as Mike mentioned, I think the idea here really is just to bring it to life, what the solution actually looks like, and if you're to use it day to day, how you can leverage it to optimize your set of assets. If we just begin, I suppose, and we look at broadly the kind of 4 key characteristics of this, and we categorize it to begin with as monitoring. So how do you keep an eye on these assets? How do you get full transparency as to how they're operating? And then secondly, how do you actually optimize it? So in that lovely plot that Mike showed, and you see how you kind of push that degradation curve to the right to maximize the residual value, you need to be able to optimize to do that and manage the batteries effectively. If we begin in the monitoring side, and what really unlocks this for us within ZeroCarbon, I would say, is our approach to modeling. So there's 3 different ways you can effectively do it. So one is a pure, I suppose, electrochemistry or physics-based model. So this is a theoretical model of how the battery will operate in the field. It's really good in that it's quite detailed and based on individual battery chemistry is excellent. The limitation typically is that model is developed under a set of operating conditions. If that battery is operated under a different set of conditions in real life, you start to deviate and the accuracy of your prediction starts to be skewed quite a bit. The second approach then you'd look at is a pure AI or data-driven approach. There's been some really good research in the last couple of years on this, and it purely looks at the data that's coming from that asset every day at a really high frequency, and it starts to build a picture of how it's operating. Again, a really good approach given that it's based on operational data. The limitation here usually can be you need to see the full lifetime of the battery to start building up these models and start training them. What we do is we take a hybrid approach. So you take your electrochemistry models, plus you take the data-driven AI approach, and it just means you can get going a lot quicker. And if things do start to deviate from that theoretical model, your AI model is able to compensate for it. So you're maximizing accuracy across the whole lifetime of the battery. Moving on to the second point here, I think, which is really key to highlight today, is the fact that we're very much OEM agnostic. And I suppose where that's coming from is we're battery chemistry agnostic. So we've got full coverage across the automotive sector, whether it's an LFP, NMC battery. We can typically ramp up with about a week's worth of data and start understanding the state of health of that battery. The two of these kind of key factors enable the monitoring. So they give you your bank of metrics that you can track each individual asset. The next step, which I think is where the value is actually really delivered, is on the optimization. So we typically look at the detailed asset view. So what is each asset actually doing on a daily basis? And you're correlating this against what the rest of the fleet is doing. It's really important because it allows you to identify those anomalies and start doing some root cause analysis, and then take that proactive action that if you do see an asset's being unduly stressed, how do you mitigate that and make sure that you're not degrading it too quickly? Finally, all this is underpinned by our ZeroCarbon cloud platform, so Lumada ZeroCarbon Cloud. And with that, you get your enterprise grade uptime and SLAs. The key data set, I suppose, that enables this solution is the telemetry that comes from the vehicle itself. So most vehicles nowadays are fitted with a telematics system, particularly in large fleets. We are compatible with existing telematics systems. If we have any specific questions on that, more than happy to just chuck it in the question box or drop us a line afterwards, and we can do a pretty quick evaluation there. But the kind of core thing there is, if there's a telematics system in place today, we typically try and work with that. That's kind of the kind of core features. I think what this looks like in practice and what the solution looks like on a daily basis. If we can just jump to the next slide, please. This is very much your landing page. So when you log into the solution, this is your fleet. I think what's really important, given fleet operators are obviously balancing a few different things, is that it's quite impactful quite quickly. So you can get that helicopter view and you can quickly identify any kind of problems that you may have. What we do with this, and I suppose our approach to this, is focusing on three primary metrics. So it's your full cycle equivalent, or your FCE, as you see here, the utilization with respect to the warranty, and then the stress level. I'll go into each of these in a bit more detail, but effectively what this enables you to do is do a like-for-like comparison across assets. Why that is necessary: simple case, you're going to have some assets come online at different times. So from a vehicle point of view, it could be a bus that's on 100,000 miles and you want to compare that with a bus that's brand new or done 200,000. It's the kind of helicopter view, which I think is quite useful. If we look at the full cycle equivalent, again, we can step into it in a little bit more detail, but effectively it's how many full cycles has that battery gone through. You can then map this to the warranty. So warranties will vary by OEM, whatever it may be. So what's the percentage that you've kind of eaten into that effectively? And finally, the stress level. I think it's nice and simple. I quite like this one myself. It's quite a simple red, amber, green status. So 0 to 1, green, nothing necessarily to worry about. Amber is 1 to 2 as a metric, and that's where you start to dig into it and see how you can mitigate that going to red. Red then is obviously quite urgent in terms of you need to address it. And we will step into kind of what makes up that metric effectively. So if we pick any one of these assets and we drill down into it, what are you actually seeing within the solution? If we can jump to the next slide, please. This is kind of your landing page at an asset view. So what's quite important is that for each vehicle in the fleet, you're getting your telematics data, and that's on each individual battery pack. You then start to build up this picture, and once you build it up to the fleet level, you saw what we previously had on the last slide. This here is for each individual asset. So when you do spot those issues that might pop up, it's been able to drill into the asset, look back on the lifetime of its use and see what are the particular factors that may be causing this to be stressed, and what can you do to help it. This is your landing page. In terms of the metrics you see here, they're quite straightforward in terms of what you'd expect: state of charge, state of health, stress level, and we look at the stress level for the given, the current time versus what it's done in its lifetime. Because there are periods of time you may need to actually stress or sweat that asset. As long as you're not doing it consistently, it's something that's manageable. And then we have a couple of other key metrics. I think what's quite important here and what's quite useful is it's not just a snapshot of what's happening today. It's also making that forecast as to what's going to happen in the future. So say, for example, if your current state of health is 96% and that's taken 4 months to get to, you cannot necessarily assume it's going to be 1% per month going forward, because there is a non-linear relationship here. And that's where we come in and we predict when that warranty is likely to expire. If we come into some of the metrics at a kind of a deeper level, I suppose, if we can jump to the next slide, please. And something I mentioned already on the kind of earlier asset landing page was the full cycle equivalent. So the full cycle equivalent is effectively a means of tracking how many full cycles the battery has gone through. It might seem like quite a straightforward thing, but it's obviously worth noting you're not necessarily using these batteries from 100 to 0%, so full cycle every day. Over time, you might do on a Monday 80 to 20, a Wednesday it could be 60 to 30, so on and so forth. It's quite easy to actually lose track of how many full cycles it's gone through. It's a really nice way of just tracking where you are with respect to the cycle limitation that is on that warranty. The kind of core things I would see here is it's the transparency into where you are, and it's obviously enabling some realistic forecasting on when that warranty is likely to expire. The next one that we'll jump into is the state of health. And this one is, I think, a little bit topical. So I would say it's about removing the black box. You might question, what is the black box? So for those of you don't know, the state of health of a battery is effectively the capacity of it today with respect to the capacity that it was rated at day one. And it's something you can't actually physically measure. What makes it quite complicated is that there's really no industry standard or best practice way for arriving at the state of health, because it's something you need to estimate. So what we do with the approach we mentioned earlier, which is the hybrid approach, taking the electrochemistry-based modeling and coupling it with the AI, we infer what that state of health is today. But I think what's quite important is we would also be quite transparent, and we include here the kind of confidence that we have around that estimation. And that confidence is going to vary over time, and that's what you see in the chart here with the two dotted lines kind of going away from the center line and coming back to it. But I think it's quite important, because what you will get from your OEM, if you go into some sort of warranty conversations or claims, they will tell you what they think the state of health of the battery is. This is really useful for showing what your kind of third-party independent view on what that state of health is, and obviously reporting the confidence of that too. So that's when we would kind of say you're taking the black box away from it, and you're saying full transparency, this is where you are, plus or minus X%. The last one I'm going to go through is the kind of stress levels, which you would have seen a bit of a snapshot on previously on the kind of the detailed asset page. And what's really nice when you see the high level comparison across assets, it's just a metric from 0 to 3 as to where you are with respect to the stress. What's quite important though is that this metric is arrived at not just taking one single thing into account, that it's a multivariable approach. So in this case, you see just a couple of the kind of key points that we would look at here. So for example, the charging temperature, the temperature while the vehicle is idle, the daily state of charge swing, and each of these come with a recommendation. It's quite dynamic too. So when you're actually on the platform itself, you can look at the last 7 days, the last week, whatever it may be, and all these update. I think when we talk about optimization though, and this is where it really comes in, it starts giving kind of tailored recommendations which are custom to your fleet and the particular makeup of the assets in them. So for example, if you land here and you see that the state of charge of the vehicle when it's left idle is typically quite high. So you're coming in here at an average of 78.1%. So leaving a vehicle parked with a high state of charge for a long period of time is actually kind of a degradation mode effectively. You kind of come here and it's obviously flagging it to you. It gives you the recommendation of what it needs to get down to. You kind of might question, okay, how can I actually control that? it's very much something that can be set up with your charge management system. So you may need that vehicle to start the shift at 95% state of charge. I think that is perfectly fine, but it doesn't need to get to 95% until that shift is about to begin. So again, it kind of comes into your charge control. How can you optimize the charging of these vehicles to minimize any stress on them? The last one here we have is the charging rate, which is expressed by the C rate, which is just quite a nice way of expressing the charge or discharge current with respect to the total capacity of the battery. So rule of thumb, the lower, the better. Works a lot nicer. That's very much just a snapshot of the solution. Any specific questions, more than happy to take in the Q&A afterwards. And if anyone would like kind of a live demo or anything like that, please just drop us a line. I'm more than happy to do that because there's quite a bit more to it. Conscious we can only kind of give the helicopter view here. But that's everything from me. Happy to hand back to Mike.
Fantastic. Thanks, Colm. Great description, and thanks for that. So I guess where we get to now is kind of the so what. So you've done all of those things. What is it worth to me as a fleet operator or of LCVs, buses, or even EHGVs going forward? And what we have here is we've taken an example of a UK bus fleet, 100 buses over 10 years, and we're kind of assuming we can make an 8-year battery last 10 years, and that has some significant economic benefit to an organization. First and foremost, you've got the depreciation cost benefit and deferred cost of replacing those batteries. You're also going to have a residual value benefit. So if you think about your own private car, and if you've ever leased a car, returning it in a better condition gets you a better bubble payment and that side of things. So this is exactly the same. At the end of the lease, that vehicle or certainly that battery is going to be more valuable. And so we see an uplift in the residual value, even if you were to terminate and move on after the 8 years for the warranty period. We'd also see, the avoidance of non-warranty based cell or battery replacements. We also see an opportunity for reduced downtime because you're monitoring and managing those batteries, as Colm very ably described, looking after those batteries really well over its life, which reduces the maintenance. It's a lot of it is kind of predictive or condition-based maintenance type requirements, but that saves a huge amount of money. And then finally, in a sense, what we're offering is kind of an outsourced battery management solution. You don't need to bring those skills and capabilities in-house. So we see there being a pretty significant cost avoidance benefit there in terms of get the experts in to look after the batteries, get your data scientists and your skills and your capabilities and experience across multiple battery types to help you think about what you do with your batteries today, but also what are the right kind of batteries for the right kind of conditions based on driver behaviors, based on different terrains, based on different geographic factors such as humidity and temperature. That's going to result in an environment where actually going forward, you're actually putting the right kind of batteries into the right kind of operational environment. And that's going to change, as we know. The technology is going to change significantly over the coming years. The tipping point of investment and return on investment around batteries has clearly been breached. So it's now we're going to be in a cycle where there's going to be huge investment in battery technologies and new ways of working and new operational methodologies that are going to start having a big impact on the way that the batteries can be run going forward. Next slide, please. So the way that we've structured our solution is to help engage with organizations really wherever they are within their cycle of development and understanding of how big an issue or how big a risk there is or how big an opportunity there is around their battery. So we have a basic and a core and a premium. And really the difference between them, as you can see, is a mixture of functionality as we move up from the basic, where we're really kind of more of a descriptive analytics solution where we're providing dashboards and information on a regular basis. It then becomes a little bit more interactive through the core solution and more rich dashboarding and information provision and alarms and alerts. And then we move to our premium, which is a lot more layered with regards to the managed service and the provision of our subject matter experts and our expertise and the knowledge and the capability we have across multiple battery types. But as a result, across these, we see up to a 30% battery TCO saving as a result of just running those batteries properly, reducing the risk, increasing the opportunity of those batteries at the end of their life. Next slide, please. So I spoke at the beginning that this is the second in a series of our webinars. The first webinar covered in a lot more detail our zero carbon charge solution, and I think it's important that we need to recognize that we focus quite a lot on the path of the electron from within the battery and out into kinetic energy. A key part of this equation is also to think about how those batteries are being charged, and the time, the place, the volume of charge that's being put into those batteries is going to have a significant impact, obviously, in the way the battery operates. So the other part of this equation is around smart charging and making sure that the flow of the electron from the grid into the battery through the charge point is managed optimally. And you know, a lot of the potential causes of safety and fire risk could actually be occurring at the charge point. So thinking about how that's being managed is one part of it, but more importantly, it's also thinking about making sure that the right level of charge is put through. The way that the battery is charged is not always on super high power charging, and just the way that the battery is being cared for through the charging process is a critical element. So that's the second part of our wider, what we call battery charging and management services. We focused on the battery management part, but the battery charging and management solution is our fully fledged managed service underpinned by our technology to deliver the most effective management of charging and of battery management. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see the pyramid of our solution, and we can engage with organizations really either through battery at the basic or the core or the premium level, but also at charge. And what's critical here is, again, we stick in the agnosticism bucket. We don't tie ourselves to any specific charge points. We can integrate with multiple charge points. And if an organization already has its own charging optimization solution, we will just simply integrate with that and utilize the data for that broader battery charging and management services. So our distinctive position in the market is we want to allow organizations, fleet operators, to have the freedom and the flexibility to maximize the delivery of their services and feel unconstrained by the transition to electricity and electric battery management and utilization of the vehicle. So we want to make it as seamless as possible from the transition from an ICE fleet to an electric fleet. And really the experience from an operational perspective is just the same. I turn up, I jump in my bus or my vehicle, and it has sufficient charge for me to carry out my activities during the day. That is our absolute objective. Obviously, we've focused today primarily onto the zero carbon battery, but we're going to talk more in the next webinar about our fully fledged service, and we'll be able to tell you more about a groundbreaking a deal that we've done with a major fleet operator here in the UK for a significant number of batteries and charge points where we're delivering this full service. So hopefully that gives you a tantalizing feel for the next installment of the zero carbon journey. So thank you for joining us today. We're going to switch over to some Q&A, but we welcome any further follow-ups, as Colm said, in terms of any demos, any further information with regards to our solution. We'd be more than happy to share. We've also got our colleague Manish there on the contact list. Please contact any of us with any questions or comments. But I'm going to now hand over to Nathan, who I believe has some questions for us to follow up on.
Great, thanks, Mike. If anyone wants to ask a question, you can use the Q&A button or just put it in the chat and we will get to it. So I've got a couple of questions already. First one is, on the degradation curve, what's the time frame? Many OEMs offer 8-year warranty on battery life, so this typically outweighs the contract term rather than the other way around.
So I think we deal with multiple different warranty conditions. So we gave the example of 8. In that instance, the contract term is actually longer, and the desire is for it to go longer. But we're also dealing with even heavier batteries that maybe have only got a 4-year warranty. I guess really the principle of what we're all about is how we can increase the life of the battery by 20% from beyond the warranty term. So that creates a significant opportunity. If the contract is shorter, then really it's a case of then the benefit is really comes back in terms of residual value. So if the contract's shorter and you're going to give that vehicle back, then there should be a pretty significant kickback in terms of the residual value that's left in that battery. The vehicle is more valuable and more operational for a longer period of time as a result of our solution.
I think just to jump in on that one also, Mike, probably worth noting that the time frame of the warranty, there's two factors. So you've kind of got the calendar kind of 8-year typical duration, or the mileage that's typically covered on it. We were actually doing a study lately looking at a fleet of HGVs for electrification. And one of the tasks of this was forecasting what the likely warranty timeframe would be. And you've got some cases definitely where the warranty is longer than the typical contract length. That's great, not an issue. But we were seeing cases also where that particular fleet would lose a warranty after just over 3 years. So in that case, your contract term is usually around 5 for this particular operator, but their warranty is gone within just after the first 3. So it's the kind of the two different elements are the ones to be wary of.
Great, thanks. Is second life use of the battery feasible, given battery technology is likely to have improved over the lifetime of the vehicle, making it a more attractive proposition?
Do you want to go for that, Colm?
I think it will. Like, it's definitely a massive market, I would say, and there's a lot of heat around it. I think it's going to emerge over time as we start to see a lot of them. I would say when we look at this is something I'm probably more particularly interested in. When we look at the recycling question that was asked, I think question 2 in terms of how many of existing batteries are recycled. There's obviously new legislation came in within the EU back in August, legislating how much of batteries need to be recycled going forward. A key part of that, and obviously likely to be adopted in the UK in some form, but a key part of that, it sets restrictions on the minimum amount of recycled quantities that go into new batteries. So for example, of a particular material that goes into a battery, X% of that needs to be recycled. I think that will drive the second life market to a certain extent. But yeah, I think waiting to see also.
Yeah, I agree. I think all the markers are that the second-hand market, or second life market, is going to be pretty significant, both through the fact that it takes several years to get lithium mines up and running, and there's likely, and you know, we saw the volumes of likely battery-powered vehicles across those 3 verticals right at the beginning. To meet those, there's going to be a significant need for second life batteries in smaller applications. So you might go from, as an example, you might go from a large double-decker bus. That battery will get down to maybe 75% state of health, but that could still be reutilized within a smaller bus for a significant period of time, because really it's not the power that's the issue, it's the range. And also the weight of the vehicle that will impact. So a lighter vehicle putting in a battery that is significantly larger but has less state of charge availability could still be utilized. And as Colm said, I think the recycling factor is going to have a big impact on just keeping the price up. So I think there's lots of opportunities that will be available to the asset owner to exploit the benefit from a residual value in that battery.
Bit of a multi-pronged question here. Given this is an emergent market and Hitachi, as ever, is at the forefront of it with all its expertise, how do you qualify or quantify the risk being mitigated? So how do you ascertain the relative difference between a terribly treated asset and one run within the advised conditions? And why are the OEMs not being more restrictive on their conditions if the risk is great?
That's a very good question. I think that's sort of that last one. I think that's partly because I think there's a lot of it is so nascent, and I think actually the risks aren't fully understood by all parties. I think even to an extent that I wish I had a crystal ball, but I think it's likely that there are going to be, even just on the normal expectations of battery or cell failure, there's going to be a significant number of battery replacements that somebody's going to have to foot the bill for. And I think at the moment, what we see in the market is this kind of rush to electrification, which is great, right? It's obviously from a carbon perspective is what we want to see. But I think the choices that are then being made in terms of the charging infrastructure around that, the way that the charging is being managed, is actually loading in risk that has been unfactored into the thinking. And I think what we are seeing is that the warranties are beginning to become more stringent. I think a few fingers are going to be burnt in the process, but the requirements and the warranty requirements are going to become, like I said, a lot more strict. And then that's why you need to have this auditability, because if you can't, as a fleet operator, if you can't prove that you've looked after those batteries appropriately, or that you've avoided risk against those batteries, then I think as with all warranties, the requirement for proof and the burden for proof will fall on the operator more and more regularly, and I think the leniency which is being applied, relative leniency that's being applied to the warranty claims at this point will change very, very rapidly, just simply through just look at the volumes. And the fact that even if it's just 5% of many thousands is very different to 5% of many hundreds, and that's going to have a big impact in the way that the market will operate and the way that the OEMs will interact with the operating fleet community.
We see that OEM guarantees are based on state of health levels, typically 80% after 8 years. The state of health of the battery is difficult to measure, as you mentioned. To what extent is an operator really able to claim under a warranty?
I think just to jump in on that one, it's definitely something we're learning. I think some of the use cases we've seen so far, it does become a little bit of a negotiation, but I think it does highlight the necessity for the operator to have their own data set on it and not be completely reliant on the OEM. So the OEM typically won't give you their full data set on the state of health, and they definitely won't give you how they're arriving at that number, given that's their core IP within the BMS. So effectively, they've got their view on it. With a solution like this, you have your view on it, and then it's trying to determine, okay, where does reality actually lie? And again, I think when we were going through the state of health slide, that's why I think it's quite important that you show the confidence around that inference, because it's full transparency on where you see yourself. Probably one good use case with a bus operator where we saw quite rapid degradation of the batteries. We were able to identify it, went back to the OEMs, they did some root cause analysis, rebalanced the battery packs, and unlocked quite a bit of extra capacity. So I think they're also learning, but for me, it would just highlight the fact you do need to take your own view on it and not be fully reliant on the OEM.
Our zero carbon battery solution, is that applicable in a sector such as telecommunication?
Yeah, I saw that question. I guess perhaps if we could have a bit more sort of clarification. If we're talking about vehicles within telco, then absolutely. If we're talking about potentially about fixed battery storage, maybe for I'm spitballing here a bit in terms of some of the cell towers, then I'm sure we could look at. I mean, ultimately, you're looking at battery charge and recharge and discharge and management. It depends where it is, but perhaps if you could put in the chat a little bit more clarification around that, I'd be happy to come back to that question shortly.
Are we working with any telecommunications companies? Telematics companies, sorry.
Telematics companies, yes, we are. Yes, we are. But we're pretty agnostic, as I said. So we've installed solutions with clients, but we will work with any telematics company, subject to the APIs and subject to the granularity and the quality of the data that they provide. So we have a list of prerequisites that we require to provide our services. That doesn't mean that it's black and white. It just really means that the extent of the dashboarding and the information that we can then play back may well be limited by the quality of the telematics messaging.
Got time for another couple of questions. Actually,
they're just has clarified. So battery for the telco towers. That's an interesting one. I mean, that's a fixed installation, for sure. I mean, ultimately, you're still dealing with the same kind of challenges around chemistries and charge and discharge. It's going to be all about whether we can get hold of that data, how easy that data is, and understand things like duty cycles and the pressure and the requirements against those batteries. I think will be all factors. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see ourselves as really the future second life application is into fixed installations, and we work with organizations and build business cases around fixed battery storage, and the whole ecosystem of then the management of power from the grid, but also through sustainable sources and storage and reuse of power through and balance of power across all of those different sources. So absolutely, that's a key part of what we're about. And yeah, we'd be happy to talk more about what we might be able to do from a telco perspective for sure. But it's all part of the same broader ecosystem of battery storage, discharge, and management. It's just the application is fixed rather than mobile.
Right. Next question is the use of AIoT and IoT on the batteries considered in gaining a deeper understanding of the batteries themselves, which can provide data pertaining to warranties, battery life, preventative maintenance use cases? This does not require removing or doubling on the BMS battery data.
I think on that one, what's kind of important when we look at a solution like this is the simplicity with how you can implement it. So typically, you're leveraging a telematics system that's already there to give you the solution. I think in terms of using AIoT or IoT, going that level deeper, really interesting. You can certainly get a wider insight into what's happening. The limitation is what's actually available via the vehicle directly. So what does the vehicle OEM make available? It's typically your battery pack voltage, current, temperature, kind of parameters on that level. So it's trying to leverage them to give you the same insight. I think going deeper doesn't really make sense from a feasibility point of view, because you then have to come in and do custom hardware installations on that vehicle. And even going in kind of below the BMS level potentially could avoid a warranty.
Good point.
Right. So ZeroCarbon battery, is this relevant to e-buses as well as LCVs and HGVs?
100%. 100%. In fact, we're probably a little bit more ahead with regards to battery within buses than we are in the other sectors at this point, just because of the maturity of that industry and actually the greater need for battery management and monitoring. So yes, 100%. We operate, our core verticals are ELCV, e-bus, and EHGV.
Right. There are many BMS battery management solutions out there from the OEMs. How is our solution different?
I'll take that one. And look, I think this is a key point here, is that we do see, and that there are some fantastic solutions out there that are kind of the vertically integrated model. So kind of the Apple style approach, where the vehicle OEM or the battery OEM then provides all of the services that we've talked about here. And we recognize, though, that actually in the industry, operators don't want to be just locked into one vehicle type. Or one vehicle OEM or one battery OEM, especially at the moment when the market is so nascent and the development in technologies is moving so rapidly. So we see ourselves more as kind of, I guess, more like the Microsoft within my analogy, where we see the value as being able to plug into multiple different BMS types from multiple different OEMs and retain that agnosticism, so that we want to make sure that from an operational fleet perspective, the organizations can essentially make the choices they would make anyway in terms of vehicle types and any procurement processes that they would like in terms of mixing the number of vehicle types or battery types that they have within their fleet. That's not our job to tell them. Our job is to then optimize and manage the batteries after that decision has been taken. So that agnosticism is absolutely critical to us, and we see that as being a significant value add from our perspective.
Can you give us a bit of clarification on where we're looking at opportunities? So are we looking at opportunities outside Europe?
For sure. So the business is obviously based and developed primarily within the UK, but we're expanding rapidly within Europe. But we're also already engaged with organisations in Asia Pacific, specifically in Australia, India, and Singapore. We obviously see under the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, just to be clear, we see that in the US as being also a significant opportunity, and obviously with Hitachi's presence globally, we can pick on any market, and we'd like to develop this business. We see it's been fortunate that a lot of the advancement in technologies and solutions and deployment has actually been from a UK and Eurocentric perspective. So that's giving us a significant advantage, we see, in terms of how we can then take proven solutions out to the market globally, and we're very keen to expand globally, obviously within a prudent and measured manner, but that's something that we see very much in our medium-term growth plans. But we also recognise it takes a long time to develop, so hence why we've already started conversations in those markets, because just managing that process carefully is critical, but also making sure that people are aware of what we offer is something that we've already started to do. So happy to talk to anybody that's thinking about any specific markets that I may not have mentioned at this point.
Thanks, Mike. That's all for the questions.
Fabulous. Well, just wrap up there then. Thank you, Colm. Thank you, everybody, for attending. It's been a real pleasure. As I said earlier, please follow up with any other questions, and please watch out for the next instalment on LinkedIn. We'll be sharing that shortly, and we look forward to engaging and speaking to you in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone.